Daniel Foster stood in the rain outside the funeral home, where they'd just buried his father, checking his empty bank account one last time before his wife Rebecca served him divorce papers, citing his poverty as the reason she could no longer stay married to a failure. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the attorney sitting in the back pew had just informed him he'd inherited $700 million from his father's secret estate. Within 3 months, Rebecca married Daniel's former boss, Gregory Whitmore, the same man who'd fired Daniel the day after his dad died, both of them flaunting their wealth on social media while Daniel quietly disappeared from their world. But when Rebecca accidentally discovered who Daniel really was, when she realized the poor man she'd abandoned was now worth more than Gregory could earn in 10 lifetimes, when she understood the magnitude of what she'd thrown away, would Daniel's revenge destroy them both, or would his transformation teach them a lesson they'd never forget? What crushing truth did Daniel reveal that made Rebecca fall to her knees? How did Gregory's empire crumble when Daniel finally made his move? And what did Daniel do with his $700 million that left them both devastated, powerless, and drowning in the consequences of their own greed? The fluorescent lights in Miller and Associates law firm flickered above Daniel Foster's head as he sat in the cramped cubicle that had become his prison for the past 6 years. His fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard, processing insurance claims with the kind of mind-numbing repetition that slowly eroded a man's soul. At 32, Daniel had imagined his life would look different, fuller, richer, meaningful. Instead, he was drowning in medical debt from his father's cancer treatment, behind on rent, and watching his marriage disintegrate in real time. His phone buzzed. Another text from Rebecca. "We need to talk when you get home. Serious." Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew what serious meant these days. It meant another argument about money, another reminder of his failures, another comparison to Gregory Whitmore, Daniel's boss, who drove a Tesla and wore suits that cost more than Daniel made in a month. Rebecca had started working as Gregory's personal assistant 8 months ago, and ever since, she'd looked at Daniel differently. Like he was something that had spoiled in the back of the refrigerator. "Foster!" Gregory's voice boomed across the office. Daniel's shoulders tensed. Gregory Whitmore stood in his office doorway, 6'3", silver-haired, radiating the confidence that came with inherited wealth and unearned authority. "My office. Now." Daniel rose, his cheap dress shoes squeaking against the linoleum. He could feel the eyes of his co-workers on him, pitying, curious, relieved it wasn't them. Gregory's office smelled like leather and expensive cologne. The older man sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled, a smile playing at his lips that never reached his eyes. "I'm going to be direct, Daniel. Your performance has been subpar, distracted. I understand you're dealing with personal issues, your father's situation, but this is a business. I can't carry dead weight." Gregory leaned back in his chair. "I'm letting you go, effective immediately. HR will process your final check. You can clear out your desk." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. "Gregory, please. My dad, he's in hospice. The bills. I just need a little more time. I can improve. I'll work overtime, whatever it takes." Gregory's expression didn't change. "Decisions made. Rebecca will have your termination paperwork ready. She's quite efficient." Something in the way he said Rebecca's name made Daniel's blood run cold. The walk back to his cubicle felt like miles. Rebecca stood near his desk, a manila folder in her hands, her expression carefully neutral. She'd been beautiful when they married 5 years ago, fresh out of college, full of dreams about building a life together. Now her eyes were hard, calculating. She'd started wearing expensive jewelry lately, gifts she claimed were from her grandmother. "Here," she handed him the folder. "Sign the bottom of each page." Her voice was professionally detached, like she was processing a transaction rather than participating in her husband's termination. "I'll wait." "Rebecca," Daniel's voice cracked. "Did you know? Did he tell you he was going to fire me?" She glanced toward Gregory's office, then back at Daniel. "It's business, Danny. Don't make it personal." "Don't make it." He couldn't finish. The betrayal was a living thing, coiling around his throat. We're married. You're my wife. We need to talk about that too. She lowered her voice, glancing around the office. Not here. Tonight. Daniel's hands shook as he signed the papers. 23 minutes later, he was on the street carrying a cardboard box with a dying cactus plant, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest employee," and a framed photo of Rebecca from their wedding. The photo mocked him now. Those smiles, those vows, that innocent belief that love could survive anything. His phone rang, unknown number. Daniel almost didn't answer, but something made him press accept. Daniel Foster? A woman's crisp, professional voice. This is Veronica Huang from Silverman, Rothschild and Associates. I'm calling regarding your father, Thomas Foster. I understand he's currently in hospice care. Daniel's throat tightened. Yes, he doesn't have much time. The doctors said maybe a week, possibly less. I'm very sorry to hear that, Mr. Foster. I need to meet with you as soon as possible. It's regarding your father's estate. There are matters of significant importance we need to discuss. Would tomorrow morning work? Say 9 a.m. at our offices downtown? Estate? His father lived in a rented room in a nursing home, had worked as a janitor his entire life. What estate could he possibly have? I think there's been a mistake. My father doesn't have an estate. He barely has anything. Mr. Foster, I can assure you there's no mistake. This is time-sensitive and confidential. Tomorrow at 9? There was something in her voice, an urgency that cut through Daniel's exhaustion. I'll be there. Daniel drove to the hospice facility in his 12-year-old Honda, the check engine light glowing like an accusation. His father lay in the bed, so diminished from the cancer that he barely looked human anymore. Thomas Foster had been a mountain of a man once, strong and steady, working double shifts to raise Daniel alone after his mother left when Daniel was 6. Now he was paper-thin skin stretched over bones, his breathing labored and wet. Hey, Dad. Daniel pulled a chair close, taking his father's cold hand. I got fired today. Rebecca, I think she's leaving me. I'm sorry. I know you worked so hard to give me a better life, and I couldn't make it work. His father's eyes opened slightly. There was something in them. Sadness, yes, but also something else. Knowledge, regret. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Don't try to talk, Dad. Save your strength. But even as Daniel said it, he knew there was no strength left to save. Thomas Foster was holding on to something, waiting for something, and Daniel didn't know what it was. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Foster, visiting hours are ending soon. You're welcome to stay longer if you'd like, given the circumstances. Daniel stayed until midnight, watching his father breathe, each breath a small miracle and a small agony. When he finally left, driving through the empty streets toward the apartment he shared with Rebecca, Daniel felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything except a dull, persistent ache. Rebecca was still awake when he got home, sitting on the couch in her silk pajamas. New ones he hadn't seen before, probably expensive. The TV played some reality show on mute. She looked up when he entered, and Daniel saw his future in her eyes before she spoke a word. I can't do this anymore, Danny. Her voice was quiet but firm. I've been trying. I really have. But your father's medical bills, you losing your job today, the debt, it's drowning both of us. I'm 30 years old. I can't spend the rest of my life struggling, watching you fail over and over. My father is dying, Rebecca. He probably has days left. Daniel's voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant and calm, like he was talking about someone else's life. I know, and I'm sorry about that. I really am. But his dying doesn't change our situation. It actually makes it worse. The funeral expenses, the remaining medical bills. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. I called a lawyer today. I'm filing for divorce. I'll move out this weekend. You can keep the apartment if you can afford the rent. Which, she didn't finish, but she didn't need to. There's someone else. Daniel said it as a statement, not a question. Gregory. Rebecca's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. He can give me the life I want, the life I deserve. I'm not going to apologize for that. You're a good person, Danny, but being good doesn't pay bills. It doesn't build a future. She walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Daniel stood in the living room of the apartment they'd furnished together with garage sale finds and optimism, and he felt something inside him crack. Not break, breaking would have been cleaner. This was a fracturing, a spider web spreading through his chest, and he knew that whatever he'd been before this moment, he would never be again. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Your father passed peacefully at 1:47 a.m. The staff wanted you to know he wasn't in pain. I'm very sorry for your loss. Please don't forget our meeting at 9 a.m. Veronica Huang. Daniel read the message 3 times before its meaning penetrated the shock. His father was dead. His wife was leaving. His job was gone. He had nothing. He was nothing. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered, tomorrow at 9 a.m. But Daniel couldn't imagine what could possibly matter anymore. The offices of Silverman, Rothschild, and Associates occupied the 43rd floor of the Sterling Tower, all glass and steel, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. Daniel felt like an imposter as he stepped off the elevator in his only suit. A wrinkled Navy affair he'd worn to job interviews and funerals, now pressed into service for both. The receptionist, a young woman with perfect posture and perfectly neutral expression, directed him to a conference room where Veronica Huang waited. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and a presence that suggested she'd eaten corporate sharks for breakfast. Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. I'm very sorry about your father. She gestured to a chair. The table between them was empty except for a leather portfolio and a box of tissues she'd positioned within his reach. A thoughtful touch that made Daniel's throat tighten. I don't understand why I'm here, Daniel said. My father worked as a janitor. He rented a room. He drove a 1998 Toyota until the transmission died 3 years ago. What estate could he possibly have? Veronica opened the portfolio, revealing a stack of documents that seemed entirely too thick for a janitor's affairs. Your father was a very private man, Mr. Foster. Did he ever talk to you about his life before you were born? Before your mother left? Daniel shook his head. He didn't like talking about the past, said it was full of ghosts and regrets. I knew he came from money, old Virginia family, I think, but he'd been disowned when he married my mother. She was working class and his family never approved. After she left, he said we were better off without them. We never heard from them again. Your grandfather, William Foster, passed away 6 months ago. Veronica pulled out a document. He was the sole heir to the Foster Textile Fortune, a company founded in 1889 that survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and eventually sold to a German conglomerate in 2008 for $800 million. Your grandfather invested wisely, very wisely. He also spent the last 30 years of his life searching for your father. Daniel's head spun. That doesn't make sense. My dad lived in poverty. If his father was looking for him, your grandfather's pride matched his fortune. Veronica's expression softened slightly. Thomas Foster, your father, walked away from everything when his family rejected your mother. He told his father to keep the money, that he'd rather work an honest job than accept blood money built on prejudice. Your grandfather spent 3 decades too stubborn to apologize, but desperate enough to hire investigators. He found your father 7 years ago. 7 years, Daniel's voice broke. 7 years ago, his father's cancer was first diagnosed. 7 years of watching Thomas Foster work double shifts while the disease slowly consumed him. 7 years of medical debt and choosing between medication and groceries. Are you telling me my father knew? He knew his father was looking for him, and he just refused. Veronica slid a letter across the table, yellowed with age, the handwriting shaky but deliberate. Your father wrote this the day after your grandfather's investigator made contact. He never sent it. We found it in his safety deposit box with instructions that you were to receive everything after his death. He wanted me to read it to you. Daniel's hands trembled as Veronica began reading his father's words in her measured, professional voice, but somehow the emotion broke through anyway. Danny, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for every burden my stubbornness placed on you. When my father found me, he offered money, millions to come home, to forgive, to forget. But forgiveness without change is just transaction. And I couldn't teach you that money matters more than principle. I couldn't show you that we crawl back to people who hurt us just because they're rich. I worked those extra shifts because I wanted you to see that a man's worth isn't his bank account. It's his character. But I also wasn't cruel enough to let you suffer for my pride forever. The money was always yours, son. I just needed to know you'd grown into a man who could handle it without letting it corrupt what I worked so hard to build in you. Everything I did, refusing the money, working until my hands bled, loving you in the only way I knew how, was to protect you from becoming the kind of man my father was. But I'm also not fool enough to die and leave you with nothing but lessons and debt. Take the inheritance. Build something beautiful with it. Just remember, the money is a tool, not a master. And whatever you do, make damn sure you're never so rich you forget what it felt like to be poor. Daniel couldn't breathe. The room tilted. Veronica pushed the tissue box closer and waited while he processed the earthquake, reshaping his understanding of his entire life. His father had chosen poverty, had chosen struggle, had watched his son suffer alongside him because of some principle, some lesson, some protection against a corruption Daniel had never even known to fear. How much? Daniel finally managed. Veronica pulled out another document. After taxes, estate fees, and various disbursements, your father donated $20 million to cancer research and another $30 million to organizations supporting working-class families. You're inheriting approximately $704 million. The money is currently held in various trusts, investments, and accounts that your grandfather's financial team has managed for decades. You also own several properties, though most have been maintained for investment purposes. Your grandfather's estate lawyer has prepared a complete portfolio. $700 million. The number was absurd, impossible, meaningless. Yesterday, Daniel had been fired, divorced, and orphaned. Today, he was wealthier than small nations. The whiplash was nauseating. There's more. Veronica hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Your grandfather included a provision. He knew he'd wronged your father, rejected him, cast him out over bigotry and pride. The inheritance comes with a request, not a requirement. He asked that you use some portion of it to expose or correct injustices, particularly those committed by people who abuse power over those with less. Your grandfather spent his final years consumed with regret. He wanted to fund a kind of reckoning for people like him, people who mistake wealth for worth and use power to crush others. Daniel thought of Gregory Whitmore smirking in his leather chair. Rebecca, cold and calculating, choosing money over marriage. The way they discarded him like garbage the moment he couldn't serve their purposes anymore. His father's letter echoed in his mind. Make damn sure you're never so rich you forget what it felt like to be poor. When can I access the funds? Veronica smiled for the first time. The primary accounts are already in your name. I can transfer operational funds to your personal account today. Say $5 million for immediate expenses. The rest will take about a week for final paperwork. We'll also need to discuss tax strategies, investment management, security protocols. $5 million today? Daniel laughed, a sound with sharp edges. 24 hours ago, he'd been worried about making rent. Transfer it. And Ms. Huang, I'm going to need your firm's services for something beyond estate management. I need investigators, good ones. And I need lawyers who specialize in corporate malfeasance and divorce proceedings. Can you recommend anyone? Veronica's smile widened. She understood exactly what Daniel was asking. I can have a team assembled by tomorrow afternoon. What's the target? I want to know everything about Gregory Whitmore, his business practices, his finances, his connections, everything. And I want to know the exact nature of my wife's relationship with him. Document everything. I want to understand exactly who they are before I decide what to do about it. Consider it done. Veronica closed the portfolio. Mr. Foster, may I offer one piece of unsolicited advice? Your father was right. Money is a tool, not a master. But it's also one hell of a weapon when wielded properly. Just make sure when you're done that you can still recognize yourself in the mirror. Daniel thought about that long drive home. He thought about it as he stopped at an ATM and checked his account balance. seeing numbers that still seemed like a clerical error. He thought about it as he sat in his car outside the apartment, where Rebecca was probably packing her things, preparing to move in with Gregory, believing she'd made the smart choice. And Daniel realized something that would have terrified the man he'd been yesterday. He wasn't sure he wanted to recognize himself in the mirror anymore. That man had been weak, powerless, easily discarded. The man he was becoming, the man his father had 700 million reasons to believe he could be, that man would make sure Gregory Whitmore and Rebecca Foster understood exactly what it cost to mistake kindness for weakness. That man would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. His father had given him a fortune. But more than that, Thomas Foster had given his son permission for a reckoning, and Daniel intended to deliver one. The funeral was small, just Daniel, 3 of his father's co-workers from various jobs over the years, and a priest who'd never met Thomas Foster, but delivered a generic service about eternal rest and God's mercy. Rebecca didn't come. She'd texted, "I'm sorry for your loss, but I think it's better if I don't attend. Gregory says it would be inappropriate given our situation." Daniel had read the message standing in his empty apartment, surrounded by boxes. Rebecca had taken half of everything, including some things that were definitively his, and he'd let her because confrontation required energy he didn't have, or didn't want to spend. Not yet. Standing at the graveside as they lowered his father into the ground, Daniel thought about the letter. About his father working himself to death to teach his son some lesson about character and principle, while sitting on the knowledge that hundreds of millions of dollars existed with Daniel's name on them. It was noble and infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. Thomas Foster had loved his son enough to let him struggle, to let him suffer, to let him grow strong in the fire of poverty. And Daniel couldn't decide if that was the most selfless or most selfish thing a father could do. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Preliminary report attached. You'll want to see this. VH." Veronica Huang's investigators had been thorough. Daniel opened the PDF and scanned the first page, his jaw tightening with each sentence. Gregory Whitmore had a history, 3 previous personal assistants, all young women, all of whom had signed NDAs and received quiet settlements after their employment ended. The pattern was clear. Rebecca wasn't special. She was just the latest in a long line of women Gregory used and discarded. There was more. Miller and Associates law firm was in trouble. Gregory had been embezzling from client escrow accounts, cooking books, and using company funds for personal expenses. The firm was 6 months from insolvency, though the board didn't know it yet. Gregory was a pyramid in collapse, scrambling to maintain appearances while everything crumbled beneath him. And Rebecca, desperate for security and blind to everything except the surface shine of wealth, had chosen to marry the captain of a sinking ship. Daniel almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then he remembered the coldness in her eyes when she'd handed him the termination papers, the way she'd looked at him like he was something that had failed to meet expectations, a product that hadn't performed as advertised. The text about his father's funeral, "Gregory says it would be inappropriate." She'd outsourced even her empathy to her new man, letting Gregory dictate what she should feel. His phone rang. Veronica Huang, her voice crisp with controlled excitement. "Mr. Foster, I have some interesting news. Gregory Whitmore just made a significant error. He fired Janet Morrison this morning. She was the senior accountant at Miller and Associates. She came to us. She has documentation of everything. The embezzlement, the fraud, the sexual harassment settlements. She's willing to testify if we can guarantee her protection and compensation. How much does she want? $2 million. It's a bargain, honestly, for what she's offering. Give her $3 million. Daniel surprised himself with how easily the words came. And make sure she has the best lawyers money can buy if there's any blowback. She's doing the right thing. People who do the right thing shouldn't suffer for it. Understood. There's something else. Rebecca filed for divorce yesterday. She's asking for half of all marital assets and spousal support. Her lawyer doesn't know about the inheritance yet. The timing means it happened after she filed, so it may not be considered marital property. But she's going to find out eventually. Let her find out." Daniel's voice was cold. "Don't hide it. In fact, make sure the information becomes public. I want her to know exactly what she walked away from." "Mr. Foster," Veronica hesitated, "may I speak candidly? Revenge is expensive, and I don't mean financially. Are you sure this is what you want? Your father's letter talked about using money to correct injustices, but this feels personal. Daniel watched the cemetery workers fill in his father's grave, shovelfuls of dirt falling like judgment. My father spent 30 years teaching me a lesson I didn't know I was learning. He died in poverty to prove that character matters more than money. But the people who stepped on me, who discarded me, who treated me like garbage, they didn't do it because of my character. They did it because of my bank account. They made everything about money. So yeah, this is personal. But it's also exactly what my father wanted. Gregory Whitmore has been crushing people with power for years. Rebecca chose wealth over love, over loyalty, over vows. They both deserve to understand what it feels like when someone with more power decides to crush them. That's not revenge. That's education. Veronica was quiet for a moment. I'll make the arrangements. But Daniel, after this is done, after you've taught them whatever lesson you think they need to learn, promise me you'll think about what comes next. Your father gave you a fortune. He also gave you a responsibility. Don't let the first part consume the second. I promise. Daniel ended the call and stood at his father's grave a little longer. I hope you know what you did, Dad. I hope this is what you wanted. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the fresh earth. Daniel turned and walked away from the cemetery, from his father's final resting place, from the man he'd been. His phone buzzed again, his bank app, showing the $5 million Veronica had transferred. But there was another notification. A friend request on social media from Rebecca. No, not a friend request. She'd tagged him in a post. Daniel opened it and felt ice flood his veins. The photo showed Rebecca and Gregory beaming at the camera, her left hand prominently displayed with a massive diamond ring catching the light. The caption read, "When you finally find someone who values you and can give you the life you deserve, so excited to start this new chapter with this amazing man. Sometimes endings are really beginnings. Blessed moving on, shak new love, best life now." Posted 15 minutes ago. His father had been in the ground for less than an hour. Daniel stared at the photo, at Rebecca's triumphant smile, at Gregory's proprietary arm around her waist, and something cold and hard settled in his chest. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Make damn sure you're never so rich you forget what it felt like to be poor. Daniel wouldn't forget, but he'd make damn sure Rebecca and Gregory learned. He opened his messages and texted Veronica. Change of plans, move faster. I want everything ready in 2 weeks, and add one more thing to the investigation. I want to buy Miller and Associates law firm. The whole thing. Find out who owns it, what they'd sell for, and make it happen quietly. Can you do that? The response came immediately. Consider it done. Welcome to the game, Mr. Foster. Daniel drove away from the cemetery in his beat-up Honda, check engine light still glowing, radio still broken. But he wasn't the same man anymore. He'd inherited more than money from his father. He'd inherited purpose. And Gregory Whitmore and Rebecca Foster were about to learn a lesson about hubris that would cost them everything they'd sacrificed their integrity to gain. The game had just begun, and they didn't even know they were playing. But they would. Soon enough, they would. 3 weeks later, Daniel sat in a corner booth at Valentino's, a restaurant Gregory and Rebecca frequented, or used to before he'd anonymously bought it and ensured they could never get a reservation again. Small victories. But Daniel wasn't interested in small anymore. The preliminary moves were complete. Miller and Associates law firm now belonged to a shell corporation owned by another shell corporation that eventually traced back to Daniel. Gregory didn't know he was working for the man he'd fired. Janet Morrison's testimony had been delivered to the State Bar Association, triggering a quiet investigation that would go public in approximately 72 hours. And the divorce proceedings with Rebecca had taken an interesting turn when her lawyer received documentation of her affair, photos, texts, hotel receipts, all perfectly legal surveillance that would devastate her claim for spousal support. Daniel had learned something important over the past month. Money didn't just open doors. It obliterated walls. The investigators Veronica hired were former FBI. The lawyers were sharks who billed $1,000 an hour and earned every penny, and the financial advisors managed his portfolio with the kind of aggressive intelligence that turned millions into more millions while he slept. His father had been right about money being a tool, but Thomas Foster had perhaps underestimated just how powerful a tool it could be in the right hands. "Mr. Foster," a young man approached the table, nervous energy radiating from him. David Kim, one of Daniel's new employees at Miller & Associates. Though David didn't know Daniel owned the firm, David only knew that the mysterious new ownership had implemented dramatic changes: better pay, actual work-life balance, zero tolerance for harassment. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner, but I wanted to thank you. What you said in that company meeting last week about protecting employees who speak up about misconduct, that meant a lot, especially after what happened with Janet Morrison." Daniel had insisted on addressing the entire firm the previous week, introduced only as a representative of the new ownership. He'd looked directly at Gregory while talking about accountability, watched the older man's face drain of color as the implication settled in. "Everyone deserves to work in an environment where they're valued and protected, David. That's not a radical concept. It's basic decency." "Well, it's radical at Miller & Associates. Or it was. Things are different now." David hesitated. "Mr. Whitmore seems really stressed lately. He snapped at 3 people today over nothing. Is his position secure?" "With the new ownership." Daniel took a sip of his wine, a 1982 Chateau Margaux that cost more than his old monthly salary. He'd developed a taste for expensive things quickly, though he tried to remember his father's warning about letting money master him instead of the reverse. "I can't speak to personnel decisions, David, but I can say that people who abuse power rarely keep it for long. Eventually, actions have consequences." After David left, Daniel pulled out his phone and scrolled through Rebecca's social media. She posted constantly now, photos of expensive dinners, designer handbags, weekend trips to wine country. Every post was a declaration of victory, a middle finger to her old life, to him. The latest showed her and Gregory at a charity gala, both dressed in formal wear that probably cost what Daniel used to make in 6 months. The caption, "When your man surprises you with a $50,000 necklace just because it's Tuesday, Jaksha spoiled, lucky girl, upgrade complete." Daniel zoomed in on the photo. Rebecca looked happy, but there was something brittle in her smile. Gregory's hand rested possessively on her waist, but his eyes were elsewhere, scanning the room with the paranoid alertness of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. Good. Let him wait. Let him wonder. The investigation was closing in. Janet Morrison's testimony was being corroborated, and the walls were tightening. But Daniel wasn't ready to strike yet. He wanted them comfortable first, complacent. He wanted them to believe they'd gotten away with it. His phone buzzed. "Veronica Huang. The Bar Association is moving forward. They'll serve Gregory with a notice of investigation tomorrow morning. His accounts will be frozen pending review. The embezzlement charges will go public within 48 hours. Are you ready for the next phase?" Daniel typed back, "More than ready. What about the firm purchase? Does Gregory know yet?" "Not yet. The paperwork was structured to delay revelation. He'll find out when the Bar investigation goes public and he tries to access firm accounts for legal defense. That's when he'll discover he no longer has access, and never will again. The irony is beautiful." "And Rebecca?" "Her lawyer received the affair documentation this afternoon. She's filing an amended petition, withdrawing the spousal support request. The divorce should be finalized within 90 days. She gets nothing except what she came into the marriage with, which was roughly $3,000 in savings and a used Volkswagen. Oh, and there's something else you should know. Rebecca tried to call you 17 times today. I'm guessing she found out about the inheritance." Daniel's heart rate didn't even spike. A month ago, the thought of Rebecca calling would have filled him with desperate hope. Now it was just noise. "Block her number. Block Gregory's too. If they want to reach me, they can do it through lawyers. Did you find the properties my grandfather owned?" "Yes, 3 estates, 2 in Virginia, 1 in Napa Valley. All have been maintained but unoccupied. The Virginia properties are historically significant. Your family built them in the 1890s. They're beautiful, Daniel. Museums have been trying to buy them for decades." worth about 40 million combined. The Napa estate is smaller, but situated on 20 acres of prime wine country. Another 15 million, conservatively. Sell the Napa property. Donate the proceeds to organizations supporting victims of workplace harassment. For the Virginia estates, I want to turn them into housing for families struggling with medical debt. Free housing, no strings attached. Can we make that happen? Veronica was quiet for a moment. That's exactly what your father hoped you'd do with this money. Not the specifics, but the spirit. Yes, we can make it happen. It'll take time and significant capital to convert them properly, but it's doable. Then do it. Daniel finished his wine and signaled for the check. A month ago, he would have agonized over the $100 dinner tab. Now he left a $500 tip and didn't think twice. And Veronica, tomorrow morning, when Gregory gets served with the investigation notice, I want to be there. Can you arrange that? You want to watch? I want him to see me. I want him to know. Not explicitly. I won't say anything incriminating, but I want him to look at me and understand that the man he fired, the man he considered beneath his notice, is the architect of his destruction. I want that moment. Is that too petty? Veronica laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of razor blades. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. I'll have you positioned in the office lobby tomorrow at 8:45 a.m. The process server arrives at 9. Wear something nice, make sure Gregory knows you've upgraded. Daniel drove home to his new apartment, a penthouse in the Sterling Tower, same building as Silverman, Rothschild, and Associates, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He'd bought it furnished, barely looking at the price, and now he stood at those windows, drinking scotch that was older than he was, watching the lights of the city sprawl beneath him like stars fallen to earth. His father had lived in a single room, had worked until his hands bled, had chosen poverty to teach his son a lesson about character, and somehow, impossibly, the lesson had worked. Daniel didn't love the money. He didn't worship it. He just understood it now, understood it as power, as tool, as weapon. His phone buzzed one more time. An email from Rebecca, subject line, "Please read this." Daniel deleted it without opening it. Whatever she wanted to say, whatever excuses or explanations or pleas she'd crafted, he didn't need to hear them. His father's letter had said, "Make damn sure you're never so rich you forget what it felt like to be poor." Daniel hadn't forgotten, but he'd also learned something his father maybe hadn't intended. Being rich meant you never had to be powerless again. And tomorrow at 9 a.m., Gregory Whitmore would learn what powerless felt like. That was justice, wasn't it? That was the reckoning his grandfather had funded, that his father had endorsed, that Daniel was delivering. He told himself that. He almost believed it. And if a small voice whispered that maybe revenge and justice weren't quite the same thing, well, Daniel had expensive scotch to drown it out. Tomorrow would be satisfying. That was enough. It had to be enough. Daniel arrived at Miller & Associates at exactly 8:42 a.m., wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost $12,000 and made him look like he'd been born into wealth rather than orphaned from it. The receptionist, a new hire who didn't recognize him, asked if he had an appointment. Daniel smiled and said he was just waiting for someone, taking a seat in the lobby with a perfect view of Gregory's office door. At 8:55, Gregory emerged from the elevator, looking haggard despite the expensive suit and fresh haircut. The man had lost weight, his face gaunt with stress, eyes darting around the lobby like he expected ambush. When his gaze landed on Daniel, confusion flickered across his features. Recognition took a moment. Daniel looked so different now, polished and powerful in ways that transcended clothing. And when it clicked, Gregory's face went through a remarkable journey. Confusion to recognition, to disbelief, to something that might have been fear. "Daniel," Gregory's voice cracked on the name. "What are you? Why are you here?" Daniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Gregory, you're looking well." The lie was obvious, almost cruel. "I had a meeting in the building. Thought I'd stop by and see how things were going." "You can't just... You were fired. You have no business being here." But there was no authority in Gregory's voice anymore. Just brittle bravado. "I'll have to ask you to leave." "Actually..." A woman appeared beside Daniel. Veronica Huang, perfectly professional in her power suit and knowing smile. Mr. Foster is here at my request. I'm Veronica Huang, attorney with Silverman, Rothschild and Associates. We represent the new ownership of Miller and Associates. Mr. Foster has been consulting with us on personnel matters. The color drained from Gregory's face. New ownership? What are you talking about? I'm a senior partner. I wasn't informed of any sale. The sale was completed 3 weeks ago. You should have received notification. Veronica consulted her tablet. Oh, I see. The emails were sent to your firm address, but there seems to have been some issue with your account access. IT has been meaning to talk to you about that. A process server appeared through the front entrance, young and professional, carrying an envelope that might as well have been a ticking bomb. Gregory Whitmore, I have documents for you. Gregory took the envelope with shaking hands. Daniel watched as the older man opened it, scanning the first page, his face transitioning from confusion to horror to devastation in the space of 30 seconds. The notice of investigation from the State Bar Association was thorough, listing every allegation, every incident, every dollar Janet Morrison had documented. Gregory looked up from the papers, his eyes finding Daniel with sudden, terrible understanding. You. This is you. You did this. It wasn't a question. Daniel said nothing, just held Gregory's gaze with the calm, cold certainty of someone who'd spent a month planning this exact moment. Veronica placed a hand on Daniel's arm, a warning, a reminder not to confirm anything that could be used against him. Mr. Whitmore, I'd suggest you contact your lawyer. Veronica's voice was professionally neutral. These are serious allegations. You'll want legal representation. My lawyer? Gregory's laugh was jagged. I am a lawyer. I've been practicing for 25 years. This is persecution. These allegations are baseless. That woman, Janet Morrison, she was incompetent. I had to fire her, and now she's making up lies to get revenge. The State Bar Association doesn't initiate investigations based on baseless claims, Mr. Whitmore. Veronica's tone sharpened. They have evidence, substantial evidence, and you should know that effective immediately, you're suspended from practicing law pending the outcome of their investigation. You're also suspended from your position here at Miller & Associates. You'll need to surrender your keys, your firm credit cards, and any client files in your possession. Security will escort you to your office to collect personal items only. Gregory's legs seemed to give out. He grabbed the reception desk for support, the envelope fluttering from his hands to scatter across the polished floor. Around the lobby, people were staring. Other lawyers, paralegals, clients waiting for appointments. The mighty Gregory Whitmore, reduced to a spectacle. Daniel felt something twist in his chest that wasn't quite satisfaction and wasn't quite guilt. It was bigger than both, stranger than either. Daniel. Gregory's voice was barely a whisper. Please, I have a family, a reputation. You were nothing when you worked here. Nothing. I gave you a job when no one else would. And this is how you repay me? By destroying my career? My life? You fired me the day after my father entered hospice. Daniel's voice was quiet but carried across the lobby like thunder. You slept with my wife while I was processing his death. You embezzled from clients, harassed women, and abused power for years. You treated people like garbage because you could, because they were poor and you were rich, and you thought that made you better. You didn't destroy your career, Gregory. You destroyed it yourself. I just made sure everyone else found out. Rebecca appeared in the lobby entrance, drawn by the commotion or summoned by Gregory's desperate text, or simply by the universe's sense of dramatic timing. She looked different, hair shorter, clothes designer, carrying herself with the artificial confidence that came from expensive accessories. But when she saw Daniel in his Tom Ford suit, saw the way Veronica stood beside him like an ally rather than a subordinate, saw the papers scattered around Gregory's feet, her expression crumbled. Danny, her voice was small, uncertain. What's happening? Gregory called me. He said to come immediately. He sounded... She stopped, really seeing him now. You look different. You look wealthy, Daniel supplied. Powerful, not poor anymore. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. My father died. I inherited. Turns out he wasn't the failure you thought he was. Turns out I'm not the failure you thought I was either. Funny how things work out. Rebecca's hand went to her mouth. You inherited. How much? About $700 million, give or take. Daniel watched her face, cataloging every emotion that flashed across it. Shock, disbelief, calculation, regret, and finally, devastating realization. But you wouldn't know that because you filed for divorce before asking if there was life insurance, inheritance, anything that might complicate your exit strategy. You just assumed I'd be poor forever, that Gregory was the smart choice. How's that working out? Gregory made a strangled sound. Rebecca turned to him, finally seeing the papers, the security guards approaching, the ruin radiating from him like heat from a fire. Gregory, what's going on? Why is Daniel talking about money? Why are there security guards? He's being investigated for embezzlement, fraud, and harassment. Daniel's voice was clinical now, detached. The firm he works for was secretly purchased 3 weeks ago. By me. He's being suspended from practicing law. His accounts are frozen. The scandal is going public tomorrow. And you, Rebecca, you left me to marry him. You posted about upgrades and lucky girls and finding someone who valued you. How valuable do you feel now? Rebecca's face went white. You did this? You destroyed him because I left you? That's insane. That's psychotic revenge, Danny. This isn't who you are. You're right. Daniel buttoned his suit jacket. This isn't who I was. But that man, the poor, powerless man you discarded, he's dead. He died in a hospice room while his wife was planning her next relationship. This is who I am now. Someone who understands that power has to be checked. That people like Gregory, people who crush others because they can, need to learn that eventually someone with more power comes along. Consider this a public service. He turned to leave, Veronica falling into step beside him. Behind them, Rebecca's voice cracked. Danny, wait. Please, can we talk? I made a mistake. I see that now. I was scared and stupid, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please. Daniel paused at the entrance, looking back one final time. Rebecca stood in the middle of the lobby, tears streaming down her face, while Gregory slumped against the desk, utterly defeated. A month ago, seeing Rebecca cry would have destroyed Daniel. Now it just felt like closing a book he'd finished reading. The story was over. These characters had nothing left to teach him. No, Rebecca, we can't talk. You made your choice. You chose money over love, security over loyalty, Gregory over me. Now live with it. The divorce will be finalized in a few weeks. You'll get exactly what you brought into the marriage, which I believe was about $3,000 in a used car. I hope it was worth it. I hope Gregory's $50,000 necklace keeps you warm at night when you realize you could have had everything if you just had the character to wait, to believe, to love me when I had nothing. But you didn't, so now you get nothing. Seems fair to me. He walked out into the morning sun, leaving behind the wreckage of Gregory and Rebecca's choices. Veronica walked beside him silently for half a block before finally speaking. How do you feel? Daniel considered the question honestly. Empty, satisfied but empty. Like I just ate a meal that tasted good going down, but left me hungry anyway. That's revenge for you. It's never as satisfying as you think it'll be. Your father knew that. That's why his letter emphasized using money to correct injustices, not just punish people who hurt you. Veronica stopped at the corner. So what now, Daniel? You've crushed them. You've made your point. You've proven you're not powerless anymore. What comes next? Daniel looked up at the sky, clear and blue and impossibly distant. Now I figure out how to be rich without forgetting what it felt like to be poor. Now I take my father's $700 million and do something with it that matters. The Virginia estates, the medical debt housing, the workplace protection initiatives. That's real. That's meaningful. Gregory and Rebecca, they were just noise, just loose ends that needed tying up. He met Veronica's eyes. My father spent 30 years teaching me a lesson. I think I'm finally starting to understand it. Money is power, but character is purpose. I've got the power now. Time to figure out the purpose. Veronica smiled. Now that's the Daniel Foster your father hoped you'd become. Welcome back from the dark side. It's good to have you. She handed him a folder. Speaking of purpose, there's a nonprofit in Seattle doing amazing work with homeless veterans. They're about to lose their funding and shut down. Thought you might be interested. Daniel took the folder. Inside was everything he'd need to save the nonprofit, to change lives, to matter. His father's voice echoed in his memory one last time. Make damn sure you're never so rich you forget what it felt like to be poor. Daniel wouldn't forget, but he also wouldn't waste time looking backward at people who'd already wasted enough of his life. Rebecca and Gregory had taught him what he didn't want to become. Now it was time to discover what he could become instead. $700 million, infinite possibility, and finally, the wisdom to understand the difference between revenge and justice, between punishment and purpose. His father's lesson was complete. Now Daniel's real life could begin.